Have you ever wondered what makes a dictatorship? How it differs from other forms of governance? Let's embark on this exploration together. A dictatorship is a form of government where power is centralized, often in the hands of a single ruler or a small group. It's characterized by a lack of democratic governance where the ruler or ruling party exercises absolute authority, free of any constitutional constraints. To put it into perspective, let's juxtapose dictatorships with other forms of government. Democracies, for instance, are built on the principle of representation, where citizens have a say in governance through elected representatives. Monarchies, on the other hand, are typically hereditary, where power is passed down through a royal lineage. While both may have centralized figures, the key difference lies in the extent of power and the absence of checks and balances in dictatorships. So dictatorships are fundamentally different from democracies and monarchies, primarily due to the concentration of power. The concept of dictatorship is not a modern invention. It has roots deep in history. The term dictator was originally a Roman title given to a magistrate, appointed by the Senate in times of crisis. This was a temporary position intended for swift decision-making in the face of emergencies. The dictator's authority was absolute, but the term of office was limited to 6 months. Fast forward to modern times and the meaning has drastically changed. Today, a dictator is a ruler who wields absolute authority, often obtained and maintained by force, without the time limitations of their Roman predecessors. They often emerge during or after periods of political, economic or social instability, capitalizing on the chaos to consolidate power. These modern dictatorships are often characterized by oppressive rule, violation of human rights, and suppression of political dissent. The dictator's power typically extends over all aspects of life, creating an environment of fear and control. Thus, dictatorships have evolved significantly over centuries, from temporary emergency measures to oppressive regimes. History has seen its fair share of infamous dictators, each leaving indelible marks. Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, and Mao Zedong are some of the notorious figures that come to mind. Hitler, with his charismatic speeches, stirred up nationalistic fervor in Germany, leading to World War II and the horrifying genocide of 6 million Jews. Stalin, on the other hand, ascended to power in the Soviet Union after Lenin's death, leading the country through the Great Purge and the Second World War. His policies resulted in widespread famine and millions of deaths. Mao Zedong, founder of the People's Republic of China, implemented the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, causing widespread social upheaval and countless deaths. These dictators, despite their rise to power through manipulation, coercion, and often violence, left lasting impacts on their countries and the world. Their policies, while devastating, significantly shaped the course of history. How does a country become a dictatorship? This question has been asked by historians and political scientists alike as they grapple with the complex nature of this form of governance. More often than not, dictatorships are not established overnight. They're the result of a series of calculated steps, often initiated by a military coup, the abolishment of democratic institutions, or the manipulation of the legal system. These strategies are designed to concentrate power in the hands of a single ruler or a small group. Another critical factor in the rise of dictatorships is the role of crises. Be it political, economic, or social, crises create an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. These are conditions in which a potential dictator can thrive, promising stability and order in the face of chaos. Regrettably, these promises often mask a grim reality of oppression and human rights abuses. Dictatorships often arise in times of crisis, exploiting instability to seize and consolidate power. Once in power, how do dictators maintain control? It's a question that delves deep into the dark arts of dictatorship. Key to a dictator's grip on power is the use of propaganda, a tool wielded to shape public perception and manufacture consent. Dictators often control the narrative, painting themselves as saviors while demonizing opposition. Censorship goes hand in hand with propaganda. Dictators suppress information that could destabilize their regime, restricting freedom of speech and press. This creates an environment where only the dictator's voice echoes, muffling dissenting opinions. Dictators also suppress opposition through intimidation and fear, often employing secret police to quash resistance. These agencies operate in shadows, their very existence serving as a chilling deterrent to opposition. These control mechanisms have a profound impact on society, curtailing individual freedoms and creating an atmosphere of fear and compliance. In essence, they serve to suppress dissent, curtail freedoms, and keep the populace in check. What kind of economic and social policies do dictatorships implement? Well, dictatorships often implement a broad spectrum of policies, ranging from stringent state control of the economy to ambitious social engineering projects. These policies are typically driven by the ideologies of the ruling class and are intended to consolidate their power. For instance, many dictatorships nationalize industries, control prices, and regulate trade to assert their dominance over the economy. On the social front, they might launch projects to shape societal norms and values, control education, or suppress cultural diversity. Now let's talk about the impact. While some of these policies may lead to short-term economic growth or societal change, the lack of competition and innovation often stunts long-term development. Additionally, the suppression of individual liberties can lead to widespread discontent and unrest. In essence, the success of these policies is often fleeting, and the failures, unfortunately, enduring. As history has shown us, these policies, while sometimes achieving short-term goals, often lead to long-term problems and discontent. Sadly, human rights violations are a common feature of dictatorships. From the suppression of free speech to the imprisonment of political opponents, dictatorships often trample upon the very rights that define our humanity. Take, for instance, the totalitarian regime of North Korea, where citizens live under constant surveillance, devoid of any political freedom. Historically, the world has witnessed horrific human rights abuses under dictatorships. The mass extermination of Jews during Hitler's reign, the brutal political purges under Stalin, and the severe persecution of intellectuals during Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution all serve as chilling reminders of the potential depth of human rights violations under dictatorial rule. The international community, through bodies like the United Nations, has often condemned such abuses and imposed sanctions. Yet the challenge lies in enforcement, as dictators typically isolate their nations, hindering external intervention. These human rights abuses remain a major concern in dealing with dictatorships. Imagine living under a dictatorship. How would your daily life be affected? Under such a regime, personal freedoms we often take for granted could become luxuries. Freedom of speech and assembly might be curtailed, if not eliminated entirely. You could be under constant surveillance, with the state monitoring your every move, both online and offline. Access to information would likely be heavily censored. The state could control the media, deciding what news you receive and how it's presented, shaping your worldview to fit their narrative. Independent journalism might be suppressed, and access to global news networks could be restricted. Quality of life varies widely under dictatorships. While some citizens may experience a semblance of stability and order, others could face poverty, inequality, and a lack of basic services. The fear of persecution and the absence of political freedom could overshadow any material comforts. Living under a dictatorship can be a harrowing experience, full of fear, uncertainty, and suppression. Dictatorships, despite their seeming invincibility, do fall. But how? A closer look reveals a multitude of pathways leading to the end of these regimes. Sometimes it's external intervention, like international military operations or diplomatic pressure, that topples the dictator. Other times it's the power of the people, rising in unison, their collective voice becoming a clarion call for change, sparking an internal revolution. However, the fall of a dictatorship does not automatically usher in a new era of freedom and democracy. The transition is often fraught with challenges, a nation caught in the throes of rebirth. It grapples with a damaged economy, a society scarred by years of oppression, and a political vacuum that must be filled carefully to avoid repeating past mistakes. And yet, despite these obstacles, the hope for a democratic future persists, a beacon guiding nations through their darkest hours. The fall of a dictatorship is often just the beginning of a long and challenging path towards democracy. Despite the lessons of history, dictatorships still exist today. In various corners of the globe, centralized power remains a prevailing reality. From the hermit kingdom of North Korea, ruled by Kim Jong-un, to the oil-rich nation of Saudi Arabia, under the absolute monarchy of King Salman, the concept of a dictatorship is far from being consigned to the annals of history. In Belarus, President Alexander Lukashenko has held on to power for over 2 decades, despite widespread protests and international condemnation. Eritrea, under the control of Isaias Afwerki since its independence, is often referred to as the North Korea of Africa due to its severe restrictions on freedom. The international community's response to these regimes varies. While economic sanctions and diplomatic pressure are common, achieving meaningful change is often a complex and challenging endeavor. The fight against dictatorships continues as the world strives for freedom, democracy, and human rights.